So we have rider questions answered as well. That is the first thing we're going to be talking about today. We gathered these up from Instagram and from Discord. So let's get started with the first question. Luca on Instagram asks, I was wondering my opinion on quickshifters and beginner riders, yay or nay? He's been told that quickshifters build bad habits for beginners. So a quick shifter on a first motorcycle, in my opinion, is no big deal because you can still use the clutch normally when you actually go to change gears, right? Like, it's just an additional feature that if you want to keep it wide open and then go ahead and blip it, that's going to allow you to slip the gear up and it's going to be just fine. However, where I think beginner riders need to focus when you think about quick shifters and all that stuff is slow speed clutch control. Whether you have a quick shifter or not is still going to be a skill you have to practice. Unless your motorcycle comes equipped with a recluse clutch or a smart clutch system like an MV Agusta. Shouldn't buy an MV Agusta as a first motorcycle. You're still going to have to learn that slow speed stuff. So a quick shifter is not going to be a huge deal breaker for bad habits for beginners because you can still practice using the clutch with a quick shifter. So no problem for you there, Luca. All right, next question came from Super Buttery on Instagram. They were asking, any fitness tips or good fitness habits to develop for motorcycling? Now, I'll be honest, motorcycling can be a very sporting and fun activity that you can do, but it can also kind of be... You don't have to be super in shape to do it. I've met lots of guys who are not that great in shape, and actually some really fast guys at the track who aren't in that great of shape who, can really rip it. But I would say if you're interested in combining your fitness and your motorcycling, I personally do a lot of cycling. I love riding bicycles, good for cardio, gets you lighter weight. I tell you guys this all the time, salads are cheaper than carbon fiber. So if you buy some salads, drop some weight, you will go faster on your motorcycle. And I think getting those thigh muscles to get built up will build that endurance to go side to side on a sport bike. But to commute around town, to do weekend rides, you don't really need that much fitness, to be honest. So something to keep in mind there. Gems Isaac, just kidding, of course I have, guys, come on. I think it's common knowledge that a V4 is greater than an inline 4, but why haven't the Japanese put one in their leader bikes? Now that's a very interesting question, isn't it? Why have no Japanese manufacturers done a top shelf leader bike with a V4 platform? And there's a couple reasons why. Historically, Japanese motorcycles have primarily been based on the inline 4 platform. You think about R6, R1, Honda CBR, all that stuff. They've primarily been inline 4s. There, of course, have been very famous V4 race-derived motorcycles from Honda, right? The VFR was a 4-cylinder V4 motorcycle. Some of the old-school RC30s as well, those are V4s. But in the modern era, I think the Japanese compete very much on value, and they know that building a V4 is expensive. This is why it's been primarily relegated to Ducati and Aprilia for carrying that V4 flag, because they can charge the premium price tag for it. It's also because, Honda specifically has, had a V4 platform in MotoGP for racing, but kept the inline 4 machines for cost purposes on the street. V4 motorcycles, of course, are going to be a little bit better on track. We've seen their prowess in MotoGP, but that's not to say historically that inline 4s haven't competed very, very well. The Yamaha, an inline 4 in MotoGP, did very well. Several championships in World Superbike. Right now, Toprak Razgatlioglu killing it on the BMW S1000RR. This is an inline 4. So specifically the Japanese, I think it's just a matter of tradition, of heritage, and that's just my own opinion on it right now. Danny here says that he was waiting for Honda to do a Fireblade V4. And I think there's this sort of idea that Yamaha might do a V4, either in the R1 or in the MotoGP program. But truthfully, if you've invested so much time into your inline 4 program, unless you really, 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 really need to, I would probably just keep that inline 4. Next question, Nick Shout. Would you upgrade stock suspension or get a new bike if power is not a concern? MT07. So this is tricky because I would need to know what you're kind of planning on doing with that machine, right? So I think that if you're the average everyday street rider, getting upgraded suspension instead of a new motorcycle doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And let me explain why. Something like an MT07 has a steel tubular frame. It's designed to be cheap, simple, easy to manufacture, and comfortable enough for people to ride around town. Something like an R6 has a stiff twin spar aluminum frame. It's super rigid laterally and is designed to go on a racetrack. Just those frames alone will dictate so much more about how the motorcycle handles. The geometry of the bike dictates a lot. The suspension, all it's going to really do is control bumps, right? So if you are riding your motorcycle and you notice that you're bottoming out the suspension, or like it feels really stiff or harsh, or it's kind of pogoing, that could be a case where upgrading your suspension makes a lot of sense, because you need it to be sized appropriately for you, right? If you're a bigger rider, 240 plus pounds, something like that, the vast majority of stock motorcycle shocks are just not going to work. And you'll notice your bike handles a bit strange. It doesn't matter how much preload you put at the rear, it's just going to feel bad, right? So that's a case where swapping suspension makes a lot of sense. But if you're trying to gain performance, it's way cheaper and easier to just get a whole new motorcycle that has a better engine, better frame, better suspension just from the factory. So that's what I would do if I were you. Let's see. Vegas says, I've learned a lot of great info from your videos. Thank you. Keep up the great work. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. We really try our best here at Yammie Noob to provide good videos. So thank you very much. EVS0941 on Discord. Can you recommend a handful of reputable advanced rider courses around the country? So this is pretty cool. I've had the chance to do several of these. I've been invited to some, and I've actually paid for some myself too. By and far, I really do think the Yamaha Champ School does a really good job. They have online courses you can do to help yourself. They have in-person schools that you can go and do track training or street training. And I really like the guys over there. I'm not paid or sponsored by them in any way, but I really just appreciate what they've done. I've done 3 different courses with them. I did an advanced racer training program and 2 different Yamaha Champ Day schools, and I had a ton of fun. The California Superbike School also does a really good job. That's famously owned by Keith Code and his son Dylan Code. Keith Code famously made the twist of the wrist. If you guys have seen those kind of cheeseball old school riding videos, really big fan of those. They make some really good stuff too. But honestly, a lot of places have MSF advanced rider courses. Those are a lot cheaper and usually more accessible, and you can learn a little bit while you're there too in your local area. So it looks like you guys are talking about some Harley stuff. Man, that's actually coming out on our newsletter tomorrow. This whole Harley go woke, go broke shenanigans. We have a lot to say about that here at Yammie Noob, but I will let that slide on the newsletter because I don't want to clog up the stream too much. Next question, Maximus Third on IG. How do I lean into the spicy bends safely? So this is something that I hear a lot from new riders. They're like, hey, Yam, I have a really tight corner coming up. How do I lean in? I want to like lean my bike over really good and have some fun. Honestly, for me on the street, I try to lean as little as possible. And let me explain why. The reason I try to not lean as much on the street is because you give yourself more ability to lean further or lean out if you're having to have that bandwidth, right? So honestly, I try to get my body off and my lower body off as much as possible and get the bike more upright through turns and take them at a little bit slower speeds, right? On a motorcycle, the faster you go around a bend, the more you have to lean typically, right? Because the bikes just work that way. And the faster you go, the more dangerous it is if you're riding in street conditions. So if you want to learn how to lean into bends safely in a spicy manner, the track is going to be the best way to do that, because that way you can repeatedly do the same corner over and over again and figure out how to really take it at the proper speed, trail it in, and lean over and feel really good on your motorcycle. But, you know, if you just want a cool photo for Instagram, you can do the whole ridiculous body position thing and get yourself way off there. I totally get it. Some people want to drag the knee on the canyon roads. It does look cool for Instagram. All right, Leech Edits on Instagram says, if you could buy any bike and build it however you would want, what bike would you do? This is a difficult question. I really think today, if you asked me that right now, any bike, if someone's just cutting me a check, right, I don't have to buy it, because you guys know I'm a cheap bastard and I always go back and forth on the bikes I want to buy. I honestly would do a Husqvarna 701 Enduro. I would do that bike. I would outfit it with all the best Farkles and parts and all that stuff. I'd make a little bit of like a do anything, go anywhere bike, and I would just rip. The thing would just do wheelies. I'd do jumps with it. I'd go on adventure rides with it. I'd run it around town. I think that'd be so much fun. So if anybody wants to send me 25 grand so I can build up a Husqvarna 701 Enduro and make some videos for the channel, I certainly will do that, because I'm too much of a cheap bastard to let go of my desert sled and do that myself. So yeah, maybe I'll do a giveaway with one. I don't know. All right, Asom on Discord. How do I convince my dad to let me ride a motorcycle? Now, this is an interesting question. If you're trying to convince your dad to let you ride a motorcycle, I think the best thing to do is probably to put yourself in a position where you don't have to convince anybody to let you. And what do I mean by that? I mean that you should probably be grown enough and paying for your own way and doing the life that you want to do, right? Living the life you want to live. It's almost impossible to convince a parental figure if they really don't want you to. And as a newly minted father, I kind of get it, you know, from like not wanting your kids to ride motorcycles. Like they are very dangerous. And my dad himself was like, hey, if you live in my house, you're not going to ride bikes. I had to wait until I moved out to then buy my own motorcycles and have fun with them. You can try to make the case that you're going to wear all the gear and be safe and et cetera, but if you have a stubborn parent, you're just going to cause strife in your family. And I really think that it's probably best. I'm not a family counselor or a therapist or anything, but I think it's probably best to minimize your strife and kind of tension in your family. And just, you know, if you want a motorcycle, wait until you're able to be by yourself and do your own thing and get your own bike. You could also, if you wanted to be, you know, a bit of a sleazeball, you could buy the bike and put it in a storage unit and then nobody ever has to know and have somebody drive you over to the storage unit, or you can walk over their bicycle over there and pick up your motorcycle. I'm not advocating that, but I'm saying you got options. You got options. Hey folks, I hope you're enjoying this Yammie Noob live stream clip. Remember, every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Central, right here on YouTube, I do the streams. If you want a chance to participate in the live streams, head over to yammie-noob.co and become a member. You'll get access to our Discord server, automatic entries to win our giveaway motorcycles, and access to our newsletter as well. It's a great way to support the show. It's like a bike night that never ends over there. It's a lot of fun, and I'm on there all the time. Join as a member on yammie-noob.co and support the show. At 20Matt on Instagram. Well, this is funny. I just mentioned this. Is renting a storage unit the best option if living in an apartment and don't want to keep a bike outside? This is a little tricky because I don't know the exact parameters. I would say if you're able to, I've seen a lot of guys do this. I'm assuming that, I don't know, I'm just going to assume you live alone because I feel like a woman would never allow you to do this if you lived with her. Maybe she's super cool and lets you. But if you live on the ground floor, you could maybe take your bike and roll it into your house. That's the cheapest and easiest way to do it. If you live on second or third floor, obviously, if there's an elevator, that's crazy. You don't want to do that with your bike. If the storage unit is close enough to where you can walk to it or ride a bicycle or drive to it and you don't mind, that could be a good option. But I think that you're probably better off keeping the bike outside and chaining it somewhere. You know, storage units can get a little pricey. It doesn't really... You know, it's kind of annoying to have to do that. But yeah, I mean, it's tough because I remember back when Spite worked at the channel, he had lots of issues with people stealing his motorcycles. And I believe he lived in an apartment at that time and even had a gate. So I get it. Like, I would really be super careful if I had to park my bike outside. And if for peace of mind, storage unit, not a terrible idea. But I will say some storage units don't let you hold stuff like that in them. They don't want stuff that can leak oil or gas or fluids. And they certainly might not let you do that if you're going to work on the bike either, too. So just something to keep in mind. Just Zach today asks, how have motorcycles impacted the way you navigate your personal life? Big question. Motorcycling to me has kind of given me a really different perspective on risk in general. I've obviously been in some pretty nasty accidents. I've crashed motorcycles on the street twice. One was very nasty. One was not so nasty. I've crashed on track and off-road more times than I care to count. I've genuinely lost track, but it doesn't matter. I've never gotten seriously hurt off-road or on track. But honestly, motorcycles have made me like so safety aware and so safety conscious with everything I do. I think that happens whenever you are operating a machine that can kill you like that. You start to look at stuff and you're like, hey, if I do that, I'm probably going to get hurt. You know, like your calculus for doing risk kind of changes. But the curve was kind of funny for me because it went to where like I took a bunch of risk when I was younger and like didn't think about the consequences. And then I got wrecked, right? And then I started really considering risk and really thinking about consequences. And I feel like I've avoided so many bad situations because I ride motorcycles. The other thing too is motorcycling has also made me realize just how like gross and car dependent our whole world is. You know, riding motorcycles makes you realize you're like, wow, like personal transportation doesn't have to be a 3,500 pound box that like is dangerous for pedestrians and damages our roadways and clogs up our infrastructure. Like, you know, if more people rode two-wheeled vehicles, there'd be so much less traffic. And I genuinely think people would be happier. I find that when I do an errand on a motorcycle versus a car, I'm usually way happier in the day that I rode my motorcycle. Like any day I ride my motorcycle is a good day, like pretty much. So I'd say that's the ways it's navigated my personal life as well. Especially now that I have a family. The biggest thing I tell myself before I leave is like, my only goal is to make it back. I just want to make it back to my house today. So yeah, I think it changes your risk and your calculations. Shane Young asks a question here on chat. I'll answer this one really quick. Best advice for someone getting back in the saddle after a serious wreck. Just wrecked my Fireblade and I'm feeling a lot of post-trauma nervousness. Man, that's a tough one. I think that like you have to get to a point where mentally you are strong enough to jump back on. And honestly, like I know some riders, you know, they'll be like, yeah, dude, ride or die, do whatever. Like if you genuinely don't feel comfortable getting back on, there is no shame in saying like, hey, I did this. I don't think I'm capable of doing it anymore. Maybe I'm going to step away from this. There's plenty of other ways to enjoy motorcycling. I would say if you're having PTSD from riding on road and you really don't want to mess with like road traffic again, you know, riding on track's great, riding off road's great. There's lots of ways to enjoy motorcycling such that it isn't quite as dangerous as it can be. So that's something I would recommend. Maybe take baby steps, right? Maybe head out on, you know, a smaller bike, get your feet wet again. That was something I did when I got back from my big wreck. I didn't ride for 18 months. And then when I got back on, it was on the giveaway FZ07 that I had in 2019, early 2019. That's when I got back on bikes again. And I just went slow, man. I didn't care. The bike only had 75 horsepower. I just had fun with it, slowly got my skills back up and got my confidence back up. And for me, there is no life that I want to live that doesn't have motorcycling in it. So that was really important to me. So quick answer right there on the question. All right, JZ Ace on Instagram. Any tips on how to stay calm after emergency situations happen? So for me, the biggest thing I would say is just pull over, get off the bike. I've had plenty of situations where I've been on the bike, had a crazy near miss, and I mean, I'll be honest, I have PTSD from my wreck, and I really don't like it when I have a close call, like a really, really close call. And I remember in 2022, I had two different, like extremely close calls. And the first thing I did was I just like parked the bike, got off of it, and was just like, I don't want to think about motorcycling for like 2 days. I don't want to like jump on a bike. I don't want to think about a bike. I don't want to do anything. So I would say the soonest you can get off the bike and just like take a breath, that's a good place to be. Because you're not going to ride very well if you're, you know, like highly aware or you're like super in your feelings and you're like super adrenaline rush. Like it's not going to be a good thing. So definitely kind of take a deep breath, take a break and get off the bike and then jump back on and have some fun with it. Nayurai on IG asks, what made you love bikes or start riding? Again, the cheap bastard theme is going to come back. I just really loved anything with an engine since as long as I can remember. I remember I was a kid and I liked cars, I liked bikes, I liked anything with wheels. I always liked Legos and putting things together. My dad always thought I was going to be an engineer. Very lofty hopes. I ended up a YouTuber. Oh my God, that's so much worse than being an engineer. Yeah, I feel like if I was on a plane and then they were like, "Oh, does anybody a doctor in here?" If my dad was still around, he'd be like, "Oh, go tell him to like and subscribe, dude. You're really adding a lot of value to the world." Anyways, so I liked engines, I liked cars, I liked all this stuff. By the time I was about 20, I realized I was like, "Oh my God, like motorcycles are really cheap. You can get a lot of go fast for not a lot of money, and they're really cool." I just thought they were super cool. So by the time I was 21, I was like, I'm going to start saving up some money, going to get a bike. And then I think when I was 22, I got my first motorcycle. It was 2015, I was 22, got my first bike. So, and it's just been, ever since then, I was like, motorcycles are the best thing ever. And I still, every time I ride, dude, I get, it's like, it's such a special feeling when you get on a bike. You're just like, there's nothing quite like it. And Yeah, I think I'll ride them for as long as I can, honestly.
Well, boys, that's the end of this video. But you know what's really cool? Our members over on YammieNoob.co are the reason that we can keep this show going. I have a ton of fun doing this, and without those members, it would simply be impossible. So as a way of giving back, I give away these awesome motorcycles. This is an MT09 SP that's up for grabs right now on YammieNoob.co. So join as a member, click that link down below on YammieNoob.co. But while you're doing that, click this link right over here and keep watching some more videos. Learn more about motorcycling, have some fun with me, watch some cool memes, and maybe I will also elucidate you to some of the finest cultural touchstones in motorcycling.